Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of art, it's the Tenet Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson, and joining me from the road of enchantment, my friend, my partner, you know him as quite possibly the most interesting man in the world, the marvelous Mr. Wes Brown.
Oh, the marvelous Mr. Wes Brown. That's a spin. I like that.
Yeah. Do you want me to keep that? Keep that
maybe.
in the mix?
Huh? Maybe. God, it feels like it's been, a month. I know you were on vacation to the great state of Ohio where great things come from. So how you been? How was the trip?
The trip was excellent. I got to meet a bunch of people I've never been able to meet face to face before. Just a quick synopsis. I found my birth family, my wife did, during COVID. And so after 2 years of interacting with everybody via social media and phone calls and texts and FaceTiming, I finally got to meet everybody in person to celebrate. I have a grandmother that's still alive and celebrated her 90th birthday.
Nice.
Yeah, Grand Betty. She's a hoot. So it was phenomenal to meet all these people. I have a grandfather that's 94, Dick Deacon. So shout out to Gramps. And I was supposed to say hello from Jimmy D, my uncle, Jim Deacon.
Yeah.
He's been listening to our podcast for, I think, a little over a year now. And he enjoys listening to it on his commutes and when he takes trips and stuff. So I appreciate him checking it out and listening in. But he wanted me for sure to say hello to you, Wes.
Oh, well, that's hi. Well, hi back to you. I appreciate that.
So
awesome.
How have you been?
Good. My mom just turned 82 and we had cupcakes and we read her birthday card. So I think that was nice. She seemed to enjoy that. So she's just chilling, watching Blue Bloods in her room, which is cool.
Right on. Tell her happy birthday from me.
I will.
Before we get started today, if you're all right with it, I'm going to make a shameless plug.
You do it.
All right. So I have a photo exhibition that opened up September 16th. It's called The Return of the Corn Mothers. 69 of my portraits, along with a painting from Emmanuel Martinez, is on display through September 2023 at History Colorado. And we have an opening reception that happens tomorrow, Friday, October 21st from 5:30 to 9 o'clock. It's free and open to the public. And you can RSVP. They're asking you to RSVP for this event, but it is free. You can RSVP via the History Colorado webpage at historycolorado.org. And when you get there, navigate to the events page and you can read about the project and find that link to RSVP. I'll be there along with Wes's wife, Tonette, that designed the books for the project and all the inductees for 2022. All right, you ready to art?
Let's do it.
Let's get our art on. All right. Our guest this week is a multidisciplinary artist that has been on our radar for quite some time. You can check out his work along with the work of his wife, Mary Whip, at their website, greeninkgalleryandstudios.com. And you can find him on Instagram at Mark_Z_art. Welcome to the program, Mark Zimmerman. Mark, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining us on a Sunday morning, which is when we're recording this from the great state of South Dakota.
Yeah. From the Black Hills, and it's gorgeous out there. I could be hiking the hills with a hound, but
instead you're spending it with us, huh?
Yeah, it's a pleasure too. So
Whereabouts in the hills do you live?
Well, we're about 3.5 miles from a little town called Nemo, little mountain town called Nemo. Nemo is actually Latin for nobody. So I live 3.5 miles from nobody. So
I didn't even know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So finding nobody, Captain Nobody, 3.5 miles from nobody. Yeah, it's a good place to be.
That's a beautiful area, deep in the heart of the Black Hills.
Yeah, we kind of got a little valley to ourselves back here. We have one neighbor who's seldom here.
Wow.
So yeah, crack the door open and the German Shepherd's gone and I'm right behind her. So
Beautiful.
It is.
So you've lived in South Dakota for a while, but you actually have a Colorado connection. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was born in Weld County Hospital in Greeley. And I think that the space of that Front Range and those high plains, because I moved from there to Western Kansas, and that wide open space, that great vista still affects my painting today. I get absolutely giddy. Years ago, by myself, drove through Western Kansas, which is not on everybody's list of top 10 places to visit. And I was absolutely giddy. I was just grinning and all by myself in a car, happy as could be, because there was a whole bunch of nothing out there. And I just love space. I love open space. And so while I live in the hills and I live in a valley, what I really paint is that wide open space, the high plains. Occasionally I do the hills, but I basically am interested in space and the vastness of it, I guess. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of buttes in your stuff. Reminds me of northwestern South Dakota.
Yeah. I think that's northwestern South Dakota, Hardin County, what I call the last best corner, is really where my art took a change from being pretty abstract and about landscape and about squares or the grid. And all of a sudden, Hardin County just like infected I did a 1 month residency up there as a teaching artist through the State Arts Council. And by the time I came back, I had, half a dozen rolls of 36 black and white photos. And now I think I have about 3,000 photos of Hardin County, all of which I ignore when I paint. So 3,000 reference photos that I then never refer to. So.
Well, it's probably burned deep into your psyche. So there's that.
It is. Yeah. I gather images for a living and they just etch themselves in my brain. So yeah, photos are kind of redundant.
Yeah. So where was the residency at? Was it in like Buffalo?
Yeah, in Buffalo, South Dakota. And then, so I did 2 weeks in Buffalo. I'll tell you how long ago 9/11 happened while I was there.
Oh, wow.
So there's a good marker for time. And then I did 2 weeks in the rural schools, the 1 and 2 room, and I guess maybe 3 room schools that they kind of open and close depending on where kids live. One of the schools I was at was called the Painter School. It's on the Painter Ranch. 5 girls and 1 teacher, and then me for the day. I would get there at like 9 and leave at 3. And I did that for 2 days. We had a grand time. It's the little. I mean, at recess they run down to the river and catch snakes. These little girls do. It's just a trip. And really talented little girls who worked super hard. Those rural schools are fun because they're not used to distractions. I mean, they sit in that room by themselves all day, every day. So like I am the distraction. They're paying attention to me. They're ready to roll. So fun stuff.
Tonette went to school in Ludlow.
Yeah, I think that was a 2 room school when I was there. Yeah, they'd split it into like kindergarten and first, and then 3rd, 4th, and 5th or something. So yeah.
And then she went to Bowman, North
Buffalo.
Dakota for high school.
Oh, she went to Bowman. Oh, she was up north. Okay.
Yeah, so she was like 11 miles from Bowman. Yeah, so we've been by that school a bunch, and those small rural schools are kind of interesting and a dying thing,
Yeah, kind of a privilege to get to work in them, I think. Someday they will be gone, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
How did you get this gig traveling around teaching art to folks all over the state of South Dakota?
Well, I met my wife because she was doing it. I was actually the director of an art center in Jamestown, North Dakota, where I never, ever planned to be. I finished graduate school in Illinois, and my then wife got a great job offer in Bismarck. And I had nothing but an adjunct job in Decatur, Illinois on my horizon. And So we took her great job in Bismarck, and I found myself in the middle of North Dakota trying to be an abstract painter. So eventually I found myself being the director of the Arts Center in Jamestown. One of the things the Arts Center did was bring in visiting artists to teach in the schools. And my wife, Mary, my current wife, my last wife, had been coming for years and years. So technically for a little bit there, I was her boss. And I like to say she didn't take directions then either. So, and so that was my intro to visiting artists. I brought them in to Jamestown to teach and kind of oversaw their residencies a little bit. And mostly they pretty much operate independently, so artists don't tend to need much direction. Just turn them loose in the school and they do what they do. And I think magic happens for those kids when you put an artist in a room. So, but anyway, I didn't know it at the time, but I was about to be divorced. And I introduced Mary to my then wife. And my wife thought, hey, this is good. Mary's perfect for Mark. He'll be okay. And about 18 months later, we got married. So my wife was right. She was picking out my next wife, which is one sign that your marriage is on the rocks. Right. But she and my first wife and I are still great friends, and she's one of my favorite people. But
that's nice.
In fact, Mary and I went down to Phoenix, and I walked her down the aisle when she got remarried. So,
oh wow,
yeah,
that's a great story, man.
Yeah, it's doesn't always work that way. I'm told.
Yeah,
right.
I can attest to that. I'm sure Wes could too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's how I found myself in the Black Hills. Mary was living here when I met her. She said she lived on a little ranch in South Dakota. And I pictured bleak, windswept, and treeless. And turns out she lives in the Black Hills in this little paradise of the valley. And so here we are. We got our studio and gallery here. And we both still work as visiting artists. And so like this year, I took 20 weeks of work, which is quite a bit, but it leaves me 32 weeks off. It's tough to get a job where you walk into the interview and you say, well, I'll need 32 weeks off. End of conversation, right?
Right.
But
right.
The visiting artist gig has been real good.
That sounds like a phenomenal program. And the fact that, that there's, how many artists are part of that program? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know the exact number, but there are dozens and, a few dozen. I mean, there are 40, 50, maybe 60 artists in that program right now. And that includes visual artists, writers, dancers, musicians, theater people, you name an art, there's somebody in there doing it. And they'll send them out to schools or institutions or anywhere that wants it. The program used to be called Artists in Schools, and now they call it Artists in Schools and Communities. Because, I do a lot of work in a community art center in Rapid City. The other job I took this year was at the Sanford Cancer Clinic in Sioux Falls, which is a pretty amazing place to sit down and do art with people.
So that particular job that you do there, that is working with people that are going through cancer treatment as a way to help, almost like art therapy?
Yeah. So, I'm not an art therapist. I'm not licensed to do that at all, but I am used as a tool by an art therapist there. So they just kind of point me in the right direction and have me do things. And it is a powerful place to work. Cancer makes things really real for people. They sent me one afternoon to work with this 10-year-old boy who's getting chemo. And I go in and I start doing these ink transfer drawings, and we paint them with watercolor. And he's doing them and I'm doing them with him, and I'm walking him through the process. And they come in and they hook him up to chemo. And then we keep working. They unhook him, and the nurse is still hanging around, and he finishes like his fourth drawing of the day. And he looks over at his nurse. He says, "Are we going to do chemo now?" and she said, "We're done." And his mom turned to me and said, he usually weeps through the whole chemo, and he missed it. He didn't even notice. So that's a pretty good way to spend my day.
Yeah,
absolutely, man.
that's crazy.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's powerful. And we've had multiple conversations on the podcast where all the things that art does for people, how it transcends different situations and how it heals. And what you just related there is the proof in the pudding right there. That's amazing.
I go there in a couple weeks for 2 weeks, but the last time I was there was a woman who wanted her portrait done, and she was really sick. She's in a wheelchair. Her husband pushed her in and out every day, and I just knew this was a portrait that was for posterity. I mean, this was to give to her kids, because she just knew she wasn't going to be there, and that's her reality. And so I gave her the portrait, and she was really delighted. And she said, "Would you draw me a hummingbird?" I said, I have 1 day left, and I can have it ready for you tomorrow when you come in. And then I'm going to be gone. I won't be here again. It's the end of my residency. And so she came in, and I didn't see her come in, but I saw her come out. I could tell she was looking for me, because I hadn't been there when she rolled in. I held up the hummingbird, and she just lit up. Her husband pushed her over to the table where I was working, and she's on the edge of tears, and she holds this hummingbird in her hands, and she looks up at me. She says, "I have a hummingbird on my tombstone." And I said, "Well, okay, and what do I do with that?" And she said to her husband, "Get me out of here before I'm a mess." Mm-hmm. And she left in tears. I stood there in tears. It's like, wow. And that's the power of art. I mean, I did a really little thing. I mean, I drew a hummingbird. I had a half hour in that by the time I draw it and paint it. So it's a little thing. But art is a powerful thing. It still rocks my world, and that day it rocked hers. And that's cool.
Yeah,
that is cool.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Art just makes our lives better in so many different ways. And as our friend Bob Ragland told me many a time, art is all around us. We take it for granted. But it's just so powerful what it can do for a person's headspace and for their lives and their life in general. It helps us make it through this journey that we're all on, and we're better for it.
Yeah
it's sweeter with it than without, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It sounds like you moved around a lot as a kid. Is that correct?
I did. I was born in Colorado, lived in Kansas, lived South Dakota briefly, moved to North Dakota where my dad went to grad school up in Grand Forks, and ended up in Fargo. So I basically grew up in Fargo, where I had tremendous art opportunities. The Fargo public schools, I counted them up once. They provided me with 15 semesters of art in 4 years of high school, which just does not happen. There were days when I had 3 art classes a day. You'd have thought I was in a school for the arts, but yeah.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, they had a special program. They threw me in as a sophomore. It was the basement of an elementary school. They gave me the key to the place. I could go there day or night and make art. And day or night, there were artists there. And what the artists got was studio space and supplies. And supplies included things like printmaking presses and screen printing materials and alabaster from Colorado and I mean, they got serious supplies. So they got supplies and workspace in exchange for putting up with about 24 high school kids. And we could ask them anything. They would show us all kinds of stuff. We got to work with them, basically. And I got to do it my sophomore year. And then as a junior, they closed the program down to just juniors and seniors. And as a senior, they just closed it down to just seniors. But I got to be in, I was the one group that got to do it 3 years running. And I did some amazing things with people. And I have to say it was fantastic, and it was impactful, and it was wasted on me like you can't believe. Because I was young and dumb, and man, was I an idiot. And had I known what I had access to now, I mean, if I could go back and whisper in my 17-year-old ears, I'd have said, dude, probably you should pay a lot more attention. But I learned a lot, and I learned from artists, and they were making art, and that was an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, that's powerful, man, that you have that experience. Yep. And you hit it just right. And it's always easy. It's always easy as you get a little older to look back at your youth and go, gosh, darn it, like I had this fantastic opportunity and I probably didn't take advantage of it. But I mean, you do recognize what you got out of it. And I think that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I got a lot out of it. It's just that I could have gotten a whole lot more. Hindsight is amazing, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I can appreciate it. Trust me.
Yeah.
So it sounded like, I mean, obviously you were recognized for your artistic aptitude, but was art always part of the equation, like growing up?
Yeah. My mother, when I was real little, had a daycare, not a nursery school, but just a daycare, half-day thing for kids just to come over for enrichment. And she had a lot of art supplies for them. I mean, there were art supplies in the basement for 10 kids, and I could go down there anytime I wanted and play with art supplies. And so there was good stuff. I mean, pretty decent watercolor paint, not bad paper, good pencils, that kind of stuff. Like she did it right. And she would say that, she could walk by, make sure I was doing some painting or something. And then she could go to the store and run some errands and have coffee with a friend and come back. I'd still be there. Give me a bunch of paint and a stack of paper, and I'm not going anywhere. So,
yeah,
it was great.
So you got the bug early. Was there anybody in your immediate family that was an influence in this, or it was just something you just,
I just did it. My brother had access to the same supplies, and he's a really good attorney. You couldn't get him to sit down and paint for anything, he just wouldn't do it. And, but it was there, and nobody told me what to do with it. No one told me how to do anything with it. It was just there. It was just, and I still believe good supplies matter. Every now and then I'll go in a school and they're painting with tempera paint that doesn't have any pigment in it, and their watercolors are wimpy, and their paper is really bad. And it's like, well, man, I can't even make art with this. Your poor kids got no chance. Just buy some prang. I mean, it's not that much spendier, so give them something to do.
When you left high school, you end up at university. It sounds like initially art wasn't where you were that's not where you were headed, that you were kind of trying to figure stuff out. Talk a little bit about that and what the catalyst was for you to finally decide to focus in on art.
Yeah. So then the question is, how much of this do I tell you? Because that program they threw me in, the director of that had it all set up for me to go to Minnesota College of Art and Design in Minneapolis after high school. And I just was really afraid to do that at the time. Art was really not what I was supposed to do. My dad was a PhD psychologist, teaching, and also had a clinical practice. And, I was supposed to go get a PhD or an MD or become an attorney or something. and certainly wasn't supposed to be an artist. If I wanted to do that on the outside, in my spare time, I guess they would understand. But I was just afraid to do it because it seemed risky. And anyway, so I said, I'll go be a wildlife biologist. And I go off to college, and I'm going to study wildlife biology. And I hate biology. But I hated my classes, and eventually I really loved a history class, and I really loved an archaeology class. And pretty soon I'm a double major in history and archaeology. And I'm also majoring in self-destruction and drugs and alcohol at the time. And I think it was after about 5 years, I'm still about a semester away from graduating with a double major, and I'm just a complete mess. And a good friend of mine saved my life, said to me, you either do something about this drug and alcohol thing you got going on in your life, or you're going to die. And I'm not going to watch it. So this is our last conversation unless you want some help, which is a really good friend. And I said, okay, what kind of help? And he had some stuff lined up. And I got help. And when I got out of treatment, I thought, I can't go back to where I've been. Everybody I know is messed up. So I switched universities, I switched majors, and I went after art like a newborn person, and which is what I was. And so all of a sudden I had a lot of passion, and I had a lot of gratefulness, and really went after it. So I was in my, kind of mid to late 20s by the time I really seriously pursued art. And so I did a BFA, a 5-year BFA up in Minnesota at Morehead State. And then went off to grad school at Illinois State, basically because I was a printmaker at the time, and they had 4 printmakers on faculty, and the printmaker at Morehead State was saying, you need more than one printmaker teaching you what to do, telling you what to do, kicking you around. So I went somewhere where there were 4 of them, and ended up switching my major. Actually, I didn't switch my major. The director of the grad program switched me into painting. I did an MA, or an MS, actually, a master's, and then you reapplied to the MFA program at Illinois State. When I reapplied, by then I was doing some painting, and I reapplied in painting, drawing, and printmaking, because I'd been a printmaker all along. He took a Sharpie and he just crossed off drawing and printmaking, and he said, "I think you're a painter now." So I became a painter, and it was good. I mean, I could have argued with him. I'm not sure that would have gone my way, but he was right, and I think I recognized that. And I hadn't done anything but a model print in a year and a half or more. So I was basically painting in print, and my drawings were very painterly. They're all about shape and color, and line and value didn't have much to do with it. And which I guess is my favorite distinction between painting and drawing is that painting is shape and color, and drawing is line and value. And so you can, if you can drain the color out of it and it still works, you're probably looking at a drawing.
So just to kind of that, and
yeah,
and a good one too. But I want to back up just a little. I know you don't know the answer to this because you took the path you did, but do you think if you'd have followed art from the get-go, it would have been different? Or do you think that because you were born again from your substance abuse, that's what gave you the drive to be an artist?
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I do know that it lit a fire, and that I walked out of treatment thinking, something or somebody gave you a whole new life here, and probably you should do something with it. And I don't know if maybe I'm fine without that. Maybe that I don't need that motivation. A lot of people don't. A lot of people, find their calling and and they pursue it with passion, and they don't need the downside of the other. So, but I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's impossible to answer, but I was wondering, I'm sure you've thought about that. I know that I look at my life and sometimes wonder, what if, and not following what you find passion in and just doing the 8 to 5 grind can suck the life out of you. So it's wonderful that you were able to make that have that rebirth and find a passion and a drive and find something that you really, really enjoy doing. So,
yeah. I try to be grateful for that. On a good day, I am.
Right. Well, we're all human.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I think it's easy to get wrapped up in whatever's going on at the time, but to step back and, live your life in the moment and with gratitude, right? Like, be grateful for what you do have. And obviously the experiences that you've had, in your past, and then your interaction with various people across the state, right, gives you some of that gratitude.
Yeah. I was thinking about this morning, I just kind of wrapped up a residency at a place in Rapid City called the Suzie Cappa Art Center. And it's a studio space and art gallery for adults with developmental disabilities. Does amazing work for a group of people who don't necessarily get that kind of amazing chance or opportunity, because they've got essentially about $1 million facility that is half studio and half gallery. And they go to work, they walk in, they sit down, and they start making art. And then the art gets made, they put it over in the gallery, and they sell it. I watched that group of people walk in, sit down, and go to work. And it's a lot of times people will say, well, what do you paint when you're inspired, or when do you paint? And I'm like, I paint when I have time to paint. And then I just go paint. I just walk in and go to work. And that go to work attitude, if I'm inspired, but I took the day to go hiking, it doesn't get much painting done. Although I think I need to feel the furnace too. So I go hiking too. But if I'm not in the studio, inspiration's of limited value. I got to be moving paint around, or it doesn't matter. So I go to work, and I watch those people at Suzie Cappa go to work, and it's their job. It's my job. It's what I do. So.
Yeah, that's a great facility, and I own a couple pieces from the Suzie Cappa. Yeah, they're at my office. I have them hanging behind me. It's a really cool experience, and they're just loving what they're doing. And like you said, they have the work ethic as well, just like anybody else. And they go in and they grind it out and create some really wonderful stuff.
Yeah. And they have good days and bad days.
Sure.
And days when they don't feel like it and it's kind of obvious, but they still sit there and do it. And I guess I kind of, even on days when it's not working, I try to sit there and do it. And for me, it doesn't always work, because I don't know what I'm going to do when I start painting. It's not unheard of for me to all of a sudden turn a canvas a quarter turn or turn it upside down and keep working. I just was wrong about which way was up.
I think it was Matisse that did that too. He'd be painting and then he'd flip it upside down and then continue. It might be wrong on who it was, but I think it was Matisse.
Yeah. Huh. I have not heard that about Matisse, but yeah. Well, yeah, if it was Matisse, then I'll take it. Yeah.
We hear this time and time again, that you just have to get into the studio and work, from artists, that, people that don't do art or aren't artists per se. They think that there's this, romantic idea of, you just go in, you automatically, it just flows out of you and it's magic. And there are days that are like that, but the bottom line is, after doing 130 some odd episodes, the common thread, or the thing that gets talked about the most with all these different artists, is that you have to get in, the studio and just do the work.
Yep. You got to have the sketchbook and you got to draw in it. You do that anywhere you go. When I go backpacking, I sit down and draw some abstraction of the mountain I'm looking at, and I'm always thinking about it. And then for me, work is, I wander out, the studio is in the barn. And so I go to work, and, every now and then a horse kicks the wall or something, or I hear him whinny or blow, or, and I think to myself, you scored here. You got pretty damn lucky, and then I wander out and walk up and down the creek or something with a dog and come back, but I do go back to work. It's what you do.
So on your regular day of being at your studio, outside of the other work that you do, what is your typical routine?
Well, I get up early because the dog eats early, and then breakfast, and I wander out there. And if I don't know what I'm going to do, which happens, then I will clean up a little bit, spend 10 minutes just putting stuff back where I left it in the wrong place and just kind of organizing. And then probably seldom get to the 10-minute mark before I have something I want to fix. A lot of what I do, I think, is fixing. I make marks. I push paint around. It lands in the wrong place. Now I have a problem I can solve. Before anything happens, I don't even have a problem other than that the canvas is white. And that's a hard problem, actually. So, I've long thought, a good intro or a good way in is just to do something. And now you got a problem you can fix, because that was wrong. And and so, it's in the wrong place, it's the wrong color, and it's way too big, So, those are all things I can do something about, but before I do that, I don't know what to do necessarily. So I go out and tinker a little bit, putter a little bit, and then by then, 10 minutes in, I'm usually going. And if it's a good day, I'll go until I realize that, I got a headache because I need to eat, and I'm really thirsty, and I should have taken a pee a while ago. But and then so now I have simpler problems to solve. I get a little eat, and go get something to eat, and have a drink, and walk with a dog or something.
So does your pieces, let's say your paintings, do they take multiple days, or can you finish a piece in a day, or how does?
Well, I tend to work with a lot of paint, and it's wet very often, quite wet. And so I end up with a lot of paintings that are laying down, because if I stand them up, they're going to be on the floor. And so I'm working with puddles of paint a lot. And I generally am working with 4, 5, 6 paintings at a time. So I've got a big enough studio that I can have paintings on walls that I'm looking at, and then paintings on tables where I'm working. Pretty much work flat, unless I'm glazing or something, or doing some line work or something. But if I'm putting in pools of color, I'm probably working flat, probably working with a knife, and a lot of water. And then, so I've got 4, 5, 6 going. It's hard to say how long. One of them, gets my attention and gets done first. Sometimes one of them will sit there for a few weeks. Sometimes it's a few days. I don't probably ever finish anything in a day.
Right. Some drying time and then moving on to a different project.
Yeah, I got a lot of drying time. Actually, and I use and it's a great metaphor for the high plains too. So I use wind and heat. I use a hairdryer quite a lot, and I get my paint to crack and craze, and so very often I'll put down a color I don't want. It's the color I want in the cracks. So I end up with if I want something, a golden ochre, but I'm planning, I know I'm going to eventually just make it fracture into little bits. So it looks like, a dry desert floor or something cracked up like that. So I'll put down, maybe I want a red that transitions to a violet, and then I put this ochre over the top and crack it up, and then there it is. So I'm a lot of times painting things I don't want to show necessarily. It's the stuff I want showing between the things I want. So
you sent me that video, which I shared with Wes. I'll make sure that I post that video on our social media so people can kind of get a sense of some of the process and see you working. And I thought it very fascinating. It looks like you work very fast. Is that correct?
Yeah, if I'm doing something, it's probably fast. I draw real fast, push paint around with some speed. And then I spend a lot of time thinking about what to do. There's a lot of time. I mean, I've got a rocking chair in the corner, and I spend time in the rocking chair thinking. And then when I know what I'm going to do, I probably do it real fast. But I need some time to imagine and dream and picture it. And so there's time away from the actual push and paint around, which is how I like to think of it too. I like to think of pushing it around, because if I'm pushing something around, I'm pretty much in charge. So I like to take control of that paint and make it do what I want it to do.
And you use an acrylic, right? Is that true?
Yeah, I am using acrylic. I started when I was in grad school. The first thing I started was oil. And I found myself, loading it up with cobalt dryer so it would dry right away. And I thought, well, so you're trying to make this oil function like acrylic. Why don't you just buy acrylic? I've gotten so that I buy my colors in pints and my white and my medium by the gallon. And I'm pretty hooked on acrylic.
Yeah.
A lot of people think they're looking at oil when they see my work. When it's a lot of people in person think, well, this must be oil. And it sure isn't. So
I definitely thought that when I first started looking at your work. I'm glad you kind of gave us a little more insight into your process, because what you don't get when you see that video is, obviously you sitting in a rocking chair kind of contemplating where you're going next with a particular piece or pieces. It's all, and I know that this probably has to be part of the process, but when you're working, it seems very intuitive. It just kind of just seemed like it's flowing out of you. But I'm glad that you spoke about that moment where you like stop and push pause for a moment, and you're just contemplating, okay, where am I going from here?
Yeah. How
long did it take you to figure out that was part of the process?
The sitting in the rocking chair?
Yeah, that push pause.
Yeah. Well, you don't see it on the video because it makes really bad video.
I would have included it though. I would have had just a brief 3-second, there he is.
Time lapse.
Chin scratching.
It's interesting because when those guys came in and shot the video, it starts with a video of me drawing and then it's me painting. So it's two different pieces. But before they came in, I knew what I wanted to drop into that sky. I think in the video, I even say something about drop in a prairie sky. And so I know I'm drawing a prairie sky, and I know I want to draw the wind. And so I want to draw with energy. And so I'm probably going to draw it pretty fast. And if I'm drawing the prairie wind or the grass, I'm drawing the wind in the grass, not just the grass. I'm drawing the call of the meadowlark and the way it echoes across that plains. I want all that in there. And so that has to be real intuitive, because I can't really draw a meadowlark, but I can feel it and draw something that feels like it. And so when I draw, that's what I'm doing. And so before that video rolled, I knew what I wanted to draw. And before the video of the painting portion rolled, I knew I was putting in a ridge line across this grid of squares and rectangles. And I knew what I wanted it to do in terms of color and value and how I wanted it to drip and run and fit in. And it's I look at that video every now and then. I think, wow, that's how that works, huh? So,
it's almost like watching someone else do it, right?
It is. Yeah. I've watched that video maybe, I don't know, 15 times, 20 times, maybe. And I'm surprised every time that that's how I do it. But I do know that people will watch me draw. Like when I go to Sioux Falls in a few weeks and work at the cancer clinic, I'll work across a table. So people will be standing on the other side of the table. And they don't have a lot of time necessarily. And so I'll draw upside down so that they're seeing it happen right side up. And I know that they've got 3 minutes. And so I'll draw a landscape with, a fence line and ridges and clouds and a sun. And my suns are square. I should probably mention that. Everything I do is squares and rectangles. And so, I'll do all that upside down in 3 minutes and then splash watercolor on it in another 2 minutes and hand them a finished piece in 5 minutes. And they walk out the door with it grinning from ear to ear. And they think, my God, that was so fast and easy. And the truth is that took 60 years,
Right. And we've talked about this quite a bit too. It's they're sitting there watching you do it for 3 minutes and it looks so easy, but like you said, it's a culmination of your entire experience of your life leading up to that moment where you're doing that particular piece that you're handing off to them. Like you said, 60 years of doing this.
Yep.
The other thing I thought from the video that was interesting is you're using a paint knife, and you were saying that a lot of people think you use a brush. And so talk about that. I'm assuming that you use a paint knife primarily, or do you kind of mix it up?
I use brushes, but I use a knife, 80-90% of the time. Even sometimes if I'm doing color glazes over something, I'll use a knife. And I don't know why that is. I just really comfortable with a knife. I like what it does. I like the marks it makes. And I like the marks it doesn't make. So, yeah. But I have a collection of brushes that don't do much.
Well, they just hang out until you're ready to use one, right?
That's right. Yeah. I've got some really nice brushes I've never touched.
That's funny.
I've got some really nice hog's bristle brushes that have a counterweight in the back end of the handle. I'm just dying to use, and I've owned them for 5 or 6 years. I haven't actually deployed one of them in a painting yet. So, but do they feel nice in your hand?
So for us lay people that don't know the difference between painting with a blade or a knife and painting with what's the experience like, and what do you think, other than maybe some control?
So what's the difference? I guess with a knife, I think it is that thinking about pushing it around. And with a knife, I can gather it and slide it. I can make it chatter across the canvas or board. I can show the textures of things underneath by scraping it tight, and then I leave just a little bit. And that's all real intuitive. I mean, I do that pretty fast when I'm working. I don't know. It's just, so like no one ever taught me how to paint. I mean, I have never had an intro to painting class because I was a printmaker as an undergrad. And I'm 2 years into grad school when the chair of the program decides I'm a painter. And so nobody is interested in explaining to me anything about how to paint. So I buy paint and I just start painting, and I have no clue. So I do all kinds of things that I don't know anybody else that's doing them, because I invented how to paint for myself. My painting is very invented and not, there was essentially no instruction. No one ever said, mix this medium with this paint and you'll get these effects. No one ever said, how are you gonna create this effect? No one ever said any of that to me. And So when I wanted an effect, I had to invent a way to make that effect. And so it's real invented and real intuitive at this point, because it's something I've been doing for so long. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to tell you the difference,
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I love what you just said, though.
Yeah.
You kind of invented it for yourself. Like, I want to do this. Now, how am I going to do it? You're problem solving,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Paintings are problems.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what artists are. That's what people don't realize, that's essentially what artists do. They're constantly problem solving,
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
They're trying to get this idea that's in their head onto this medium and make it look the way they envision it. And sometimes it takes you, a long time to figure out how to do that. I love the fact that you taught yourself, the way that you do, the way that you paint, and it shows because it looks original because you developed it the way that you see things and want to convey them.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who's doing anything close to what I do.
I agree. I mean, Wes and I look at a lot of work, and I will say, I don't see anything out there like what you do.
Yeah.
I want to say something though.
Yeah, go for it.
I do a lot of landscape photography, and I've looked at your stuff, and I'm like, I want to recreate that photographically and with, or something. But then your stuff is so unique that I'm afraid of, like, somebody will be like, well, you're just trying to copy Mark. And you couldn't get away with it because it is so unique. So I totally agree with what you're saying. I don't see anybody else doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think you could have a crack at it and it would be yours though. I mean, I never worry about, giving away secrets or keeping secrets or, what I do is so different. No one's going to do it.
Right.
You're welcome to my ideas. By the time you make them yours, you won't be doing what I'm doing.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess I'm real. Every now and then I kind of show somebody a lot of stuff that I'm doing. And they're always like, I can't believe you're showing me this. I'm like, well, we're just sharing here, right? We're all artists and this is not secret stuff. This is what I do. And you're welcome to the secrets. By the time you do it, it will be your secret and it'll be your work. And so I guess I don't keep secrets. I don't think I need to.
Yeah. I love that attitude because, and I've said this about photographers in the past, I've worked with a lot of photographers and some of them are really keep things close to the chest because they're afraid you're going to copy their style or whatever. And like you said, when it's all said and done, it's still yours. It's still your interpretation of what they're doing. But so I love the attitude. That's amazing. And I have to say, I've loved your stuff since I first saw it, but the more I look at it and, I've been down to Chance's studio, Perfect Hanging Gallery. And I know you've had stuff there and then 613.
Yeah,
so,
and then Prairie Edge in Rapid too. So it's kind of three places in Rapid City. Yeah. Yeah.
And I've been there, and the more I look at your stuff, the more I just even more and more fall in love with it and intrigued by it. And I can't get enough of it. So.
Oh, thanks. That's gratifying. I love it when someone loves it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, I want to take a moment and talk about a piece.
Yeah.
This one that you just recently posted on Instagram, Orange Sun Burning.
Right.
Talk about this piece and what all you have going on in it and the significance of these squares and rectangles that you use specifically with like the sun, because that's something you don't see as a square sun.
Yeah. Everybody knows the sun is a giant flaming square in the sky, right? So,
except maybe if you're one of the flat earther people, right? Like maybe you think the sun might be flat too.
Maybe. So I don't like squares, and I don't like the grid. And long ago, I was in fact when I was in graduate school, and the reason I started painting landscapes. John Plouffe, he's a sculptor out of Chicago. He was a visiting artist when I was in grad school, and he showed up in my studio and he looked at all my work, and I was doing all this real funky, surreal stuff. And he said, this is all great, and I can tell you think it's real important, and you're really into it. And where's the other? Where's the stuff you don't like? The stuff you don't care about? What bothers you? Where's that stuff? I didn't have an answer. I didn't have an answer for a couple of years, except that midway through grad school, about the time that I was, forcibly switched to painting, I was lost. I didn't know what to do. And I had a critique where a guy walked into a guy I knew quite well, an adjunct professor. He and I were buddies. Came into my studio and he was just violently enraged at what I was painting because it was trash. It was garbage. And he threw his coffee cup across the room I don't think he even knew he did that. That was part of storming out. And he said something like, "What the F is this shit?" And he was down the hall and down the stairs, and the door slammed. He was gone. I thought, well, there's a hell of a critique. And then the door rips back open and he hollers up the staircase, "If you ever have anything worth looking at, give me a call," and slams the door again. And that is the end of my critique. So I painted 72 of the next 90 hours. And I just pushed paint around. I didn't think, I just painted. And somewhere in that 72 hours of painting, I realized I was painting landscapes for the first time ever. I'd maybe done some in high school or something, but I'd never painted landscapes or done a landscape. And there were these boxes in my landscape. My landscapes were boxed up and there were boxes in them and squares in them. And I thought, what the hell is that? And then I thought, that's the other. I don't like those squares. That's what I don't like in landscapes. I don't like it when they fence the landscape into little squares. I don't like it when they grid it up. I don't like when they box it for me. And there's the other. And so now I'm painting landscapes and they're full of the other. And so I'm painting what I don't love and I'm painting what I do love. And a lot of what I'm looking at in that painting is that I love paint. I just love the stuff. I love to push it around. I love what it will do. And so a lot of it is just love of paint. But so I'm looking at that orange sun burning piece and it's, so I'm thinking about a prairie sky and it's broken into squares. And my sun is a square and the moon is a square. And I got a fence line, and man, do I hate fences. And so there's all this stuff in there I don't like. And it's all in kind of conflict as opposed to the things I do love. So that's what you're looking at in orange sun burning there. Yeah, I don't know.
It's stunning, man. I love the contrast. And I love like you mentioned, the conflict that's going on there. Like there's tension in there. There's beauty and there's tension. And it just draws you in. Like you can't look away from it. Like and I'm looking at it, in digital form on a computer screen. So, I can only imagine what it looks like, in person.
Yeah, it's a lot richer in person. The color is
hard to believe, man.
You can't photograph how rich that paint is because it's deep and thick and long ago I figured out that I could get light to hang in a painting, like in the paint itself. Like if you get a thick enough paint and there's enough transparency to it, they glow. And man, I love paintings that glow. There's a painting in New York. I can't even tell you the painter, but there's this big yellow background, and it's this Baroque painter, and he paints this yellow background, and it just glows, and it's nothing but the paint that's doing it. There's no contrast in color that's setting it up. It's just the substance itself is glowing, And I remember looking at that for a half an hour one day. I wasn't looking at the painting. I can't tell you who did it, but man, his yellow, it glows. And I remember thinking, yeah, you're going to make yellow glow. You're going to figure out how to do that. So I spent a lot of time making them glow.
What I love about this painting is the contrast between this, what the paint is doing in the sky and then in the buttes, where it's really smooth and flowing in the buttes, but the sky is really cragged and cracked, and lots of contrast. I love that interplay with those those textures, so to speak.
Yeah, well, the buttes are done with a tremendous amount of water and a lot of paint, and so it's really fluid. And then that's one of those skies where what you can't see is that buried under all that black that's lodged in the cracks, the black is actually really transparent. And there's this glowing blue underneath that ochre. So there's this hot blue glows from underneath the ochre through the cracks. And then there's this real transparent black that's scraped really tight over the ochre. So, in the photo, you don't see the blue. But in person, it's like, yeah, okay. There's color in the color under the color. It's a complex little bit of paint.
So
yeah,
you just finished this.
I kind of love it.
Yeah. So, you were going to say something, Todd?
I was going to comment on just how layered it looks, and again, just looking at it on a computer screen. So I'd love to see this piece in person. And then the fence line, that's drawn in. Yeah. That's that ink transfer, or how do you go about that?
That's paint.
Oh, it is paint. Okay.
Yeah. So that's actually doing a couple different things with paint. I'm squeezing it out of a squeeze bottle. So it's real fluid. And if I leave it alone, I get a real thin line, and it's very, very much like a drawn line, because I can squeeze paint out of this. No one ever taught me this, but this is what I do. I'm squeezing paint out of a bottle, and I can draw really fast that way. So, I draw that fence line, that's a minute of drawing. Once I decide to put it in and I know what I'm going to do, I draw that in a minute. And then underneath it, I drew some grass with it real fluid, but that was done on a separate passage when the fence was dry. And then, so I draw that all in a minute, that grass, and then I take a spray bottle and hose that thing down so it all runs and pools and drips. So that all that fluid paint is now running across my canvas. And if it runs where I don't want it, I just pick it up. And if it runs where I do like it, then great. And I leave it. And yeah.
So is this a new piece? I know Todd said it was new on Instagram.
I think it's new on Instagram, but I think it's actually from 2021.
Okay. Is this hanging anywhere, or is it sold?
It is at Gallery 613 in Rapid, and we'll be there only a short time longer, because I just learned that they are not going to be with us for long. So,
oh, really?
Oh, man.
Yeah. I know. It's a great gallery and a great space, and Greg and Jay are great, but they're just having trouble keeping the doors open. So,
yeah.
So I'm going to, at the end of the month, go pick up my paintings, and then it'll be hanging at my gallery out here, which, as we say, is happily open by appointment.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you can come out and do a studio visit and see your gallery.
You bet. Yeah, we love that, and there's a nice gallery space, pretty large gallery space, and then a printmaking area that we're supposed to share, except I don't make any prints anymore. And then my wife Mary's studio is upstairs, and mine's around the corner. So it's a pretty big space in the barn. Mm. Yeah, and happily by appointment. We really are happy to make appointments and have people out. But we are in 3.5 miles from nobody. So we don't just, we don't just sit out there and wait for somebody to show up because they're not coming.
Nobody's coming.
Nobody's coming. Yep. But appointments are great.
Yeah. And I'm definitely going to take you up on that. I know it's not just for me, but I definitely want to come out and I'll bring Tonette with me. But I'm going to go down to 613 this week and look at this piece because I'm really digging this. And so can you say how much it's going for, what you have it listed at? Or
I think we got it marked like 25% off. And I think it's, I don't know exactly.
Okay.
I think it's like a $2,000 piece and it's 25% off or something like that. Okay. I know what I could do the math and figure out how much it costs because I just charge by the square inch these days.
Oh, so. Okay.
Long ago, stopped just imagining I knew what was better and what people would like. And so I just charge by the square inch for my time. And I'm continually surprised. People love something. I'm like, I don't know if that one really works. And the next person who walks, does the gallery visit, walks in and goes, oh, that one, that's the one I want, and it's like, okay, thought I kind of messed up, So,
well, us patrons are fickle bitches.
Yeah.
That piece that we were just talking about, Orange Sun Burning, that's 30 inches by 30 inches. Is that right. A typical size that you work in, or is it all over the board?
I do a lot of 30 by 30. I do a lot of 30 by 40, 30 by 48, and 24 by 36. It is a little nod to kind of sizes that people want in their, have room for in domestic architecture. That is a consideration. I'd like it if people brought them home and hung them up. For a long time, I painted for a couple of years. Everything I painted was 5 feet tall and 9 feet 9 inches wide, and then needed to be guyed out by wires that hung off the wall a ways. Which someone pointed out there was a reason, more than one reason, these weren't going home with people. Absolutely nobody has room for one of these paintings in their house. And so what do you think you're doing is kind of what this friend of mine said. And I was like, well, I don't know. I just really wanted to paint on large shaped canvases and have them guyed out by wires and hanging in front of the wall. So
I'll tell you though, I see a lot of people painting really, really big, and those end up in museums and, big galleries. And if you're, so there's a place for them, that's for sure. Yeah. And they're gorgeous, and they'll go in museums and fit nice. So, but yeah.
Yeah. When we built the gallery, we've got low ceilings because it was built as a barn with hay storage above. So the beams are fairly low. And so I built a pocket in the wall, one wall in my studio, so I can get an 8 foot high painting on that wall to work at. So I thought I was thinking ahead for the museum scale too. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
There's an artist here in Colorado, and all of a sudden I lost his name, but he's always part of the Coors Western art exhibit and sale. And he does airbrushing. And so what he did in his studio is he has a section of the floor cut out and a pulley system so he can raise and lower the piece as he works on it, which I thought was pretty inventive, well thought out.
Yeah. Monet did that at Gavarni when he was doing those big water lily paintings. Oh. He was, pretty elderly, and at least this is what I've read. I mean, I wasn't there to watch, but he would have his assistants dig him a trench, and then they could raise and lower this painting. So when he was painting at the top, it was actually below the ground. And when he was painting at the bottom, it was up so he could, stand or sit, whatever he wanted to do. But it's nice to have gallery assistants who will dig you a 30-foot trench. And
yeah, right.
Or paint it for you. I've seen that.
Yeah.
Well,
Wes lives nearby.
Yes.
And on a bet for the right price, he'll come up. I know he can dig a hole. If there's anything that Wes can do, he can dig a hole.
You know, we live on rock.
Oh, okay. Well, that might not work so well.
The first time I was going to do a little digging out here, we were going to bury a electric line out to the gallery and studio. And I thought, well, you know, a morning with a shovel and I'll be there. I mean, it's hard work, but I'll do it. And so I used a shovel for, probably not 10 minutes. And then I went and got a pickaxe. And 2 days later, I was at the studio with a trench about half as deep as I'd imagined. And you're just clinking along on rock.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be no trenches out here.
Tenant wants to acknowledge our media sponsor, New Magazine. That's NUE. You can follow both the national and the Denver edition of New Magazine on Instagram. The national edition can be found at new_magazine and the Denver edition at new_Denver_magazine. And I want to share with you something very exciting. Check out the newly launched New Denver Gallery Guide. Look for the signage that says New Denver Gallery Guide that has a QR code. Scan it with your phone, and you have instant access to a comprehensive digital guide to Denver's finest galleries and exhibitions. Find this QR code in your favorite gallery, hotel, or coffee shop as you visit and explore Denver. Thanks for listening.
I'm Mark Zimmerman, and you're listening to the Tenant Podcast.
You talked about the catalyst that kind of set you on this path with this instructor that, you know, was like just upset with what was going on in your studio at the time. For some people, that would have stopped them in their tracks, but that just lit a fire under you, it seemed like. Talk a little bit about how you felt at that moment. Like, I mean, I think it's curious, like how people react to certain situations and how that can inspire somebody in the moment that, you know, could have gone the other way, right?
Yeah, you know, I think some of it is where I was in life at the time. You know, I'm in my late 20s. By the time I'm about done with, you know, halfway through grad school, I'm in my late 20s. I'm a little older. I had friends who had this guy for an intro class, and they didn't respond nearly as well to those critiques. They would come to me crying because, you know, that's how it had gone. And yeah, I mean, I didn't bat an eye. I was like, oh, yeah, that's shit. All right. Probably should do something about that. You know, he's certainly right. I mean, it was exactly what someone needed to say. I mean, because otherwise I could have frittered around and, you know, played with it a little bit longer. Who knows? I might still be doing it. You know, someone needed to say, you know, this is absolute garbage and you need to knock it off. And I don't think I've needed that critique since, but at the moment I recognized that, yeah, okay, this is garbage. You need to quit this. And I did what I did the only thing I know how to do, and that's push paint around. I just got a lot of paint out and pushed it around on big canvases. I was literally grabbing handfuls and sliding them with the palm of my hand across canvas. I mean, and I ended up making landscapes that way. And for the first time realized, yeah, okay, that's a landscape. And you got your mat board scraps and you put straight edges in so you could shove paint up against this straight edge. And, you know, why'd you do that? That's crazy. And it's like, oh, you're making the fences that enclose all this stuff because you don't like being closed in. And it's interesting because I was in Illinois at the time, and the landscapes I painted were these Western landscapes, the Mountain West. You know, because summer would roll around, and when I wasn't painting houses to pay for grad school, I would take a week or 10 days or something and run to the Mountain West and go backpacking. And so I was escaping this industrial landscape that is downstate Illinois. You know, when I first moved there, I kept saying, I miss open space. It's so closed in. And people would say, well, you can go out there's cornfields for miles and just, you know, drive out of town and there's cornfields. And it's like, you know, but a cornfield doesn't do it. A cornfield is an industrial agriculturally industrial wasteland. I mean, it's a monoculture. They've sprayed it until only one thing can possibly live. And then they put it in a square. This isn't the space I need. I need this other space, this open space, this vastness that the West offers. And so, even here, Mary would be delighted to hike up and down the creek and look at, bryophytes and fungus and all these special little things, these little plants that grow in the dark places down at the bottom of the canyon. And I want to get out of there and get up and see what's out there. So I hike to the tops of ridges, and she drags me down into the bottomlands, and I know more about bryophytes and lichens than I wish maybe I knew sometimes. But she loves the little things. She's always doing paintings or drawings of little tiny orchids, and I'm painting the whole landscape at once.
The one thing I'll just share is there's that strip between Vivian and Pier, right? And as you're getting close to Pier, it goes north to Pier. There's these rolling hills. Some people will think that's ugly and there's nothing there. There's no trees, but these just beautiful, just smooth rolling hills. I find that just absolutely gorgeous, especially when the wind's blowing and the grass is moving, Yep.
I am right there with you. I can see them in my head right now.
Yeah.
I might stop and take photos of those someday, except they're in my head, and I don't even need the photo at this point. Yep.
Yeah, I've tempted to stop a number of times, but I'm looking for light, and the light's never, because I'm always in a hurry because I'm either going to see my dad or coming back from seeing him, and it's never the right time. But man, I just love that area. So
yeah.
I love the vast spaces with you. That's probably why I'm attracted to you. And that, like you said, the northwest corner up in northwest South Dakota, those buttes are just really amazing to look at.
Yeah, I actually got a grant from the State Arts Council to go up there and photograph that county. So I lived in the Slim Buttes for a few days in a tent, spent all day driving little tiny back roads, and I had at the time, what was a pretty new to me used Subaru, and racked up enough miles on gravel in Hardin County that it needed an oil change almost by the time I got back. And the guy came out and he said, you aren't going to believe this, but you need a new air filter. And you had a new air filter and I'm like, yeah, I believe that. Yeah, we might have been on some gravel. Yeah, put a new one in. But he was, the guy at that Subaru place was just totally embarrassed that he needed to come out and show me this air filter because, there's no way I should have needed one, except I knew what I've been doing. And yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
You're out there driving around rattlesnakes and so they coil up in the middle of the gravel, so you drive around them or straddle them if you have to, and just keep right on driving. So,
yeah.
I can appreciate that, like Wes says, those wide open spaces. I've made many a drive across the United States from Colorado to Ohio and across the state of Kansas on I-70. And I always find beauty in it. A lot of people, they think it's boring, it's too flat or whatever, but there's a certain beauty that it's indescribable to me. But I guess only certain people maybe appreciate that sort of thing, of the wide open spaces.
I think you're maybe born to it. Because my earliest memories, the memories I have, the very first landscapes I remember are that landscape. And so, now I live in this valley, and what I want to do is get out of the Black Hills and paint the plains. And I think it has to do, it's fine if the mountains are on the horizon, but even, I love backpacking in the mountains, but I really like getting out of them and seeing them from across the plains. That's where I get this thrill from the landscape. Yeah, we went to a place in the Bighorns this fall, and just stunning mountain scenery. These cliffs that drop straight into lakes, and mountains that jut up out of nowhere, and Yeah, I was more excited about them from, 20 miles across the plains. Everybody else is oohing and awing like, oh, isn't that spectacular? And yeah, it is, but it was better from 20 miles away.
Just past Gillette where you can see him kind of itching up.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's funny. Hey, I want to circle back a little bit to your art education. Obviously, you were all in at that moment, that period of your life. You've gone from this place where, you were consumed by, alcohol and drugs or whatever, but got out of that. And then you were able to just focus in on your art. How did you feel about the education that you got from both Moorhead and Illinois State?
Illinois State. Yeah. I got a fantastic art education at Moorhead State. It's now Minnesota State Moorhead, I guess, but it was just little old Moorhead State when I was there. And they had a faculty that was just spectacular. I mean, there was one printmaker. There was, were there one or two painters? I think maybe just one that I worked with anyway. Couple people taught drawing. One guy was sculpture. There was a one-woman art history department, but she was an amazing art history department who single-handedly brought art history alive and just made it the most. I mean, and it was so demanding. I mean, her classes were incredibly difficult. I mean, I didn't really tell anybody how I was doing in there because nobody was ace in her class. And, and I didn't even take notes in her class because I was so fascinated by the lectures. I was just wrapped up and eating it up. And the chair of the department was this guy from Hungary. He'd escaped Hungary, literally like Russian dogs barking at his heels as he fled Hungary. He was on a list of people, student organizers who weren't supposed to ever reappear. And, he just didn't have time for goofing around. I mean, art was serious to these people. And I was really ready for that. And I think in some ways they were a pretty demanding faculty. A tiny little faculty, but and the printmaker I had, my main professor at Moorhead State, really good and really pushed me, and he made me do things I didn't want to do, and said, "Nope, you're going to do it, and this is why." And so I learned a lot as an undergrad, and then, like I said, I went to Illinois State because they had a big print program. They had 4 printmakers on faculty. And then I ended up not being a printmaker and lucked into some painting professors and adjuncts at the time that were just spectacular. I got lucky. I mean, I think there are probably a lot of great faculties out there and a lot of great art schools. But I lucked into one and then I lucked into another one. And I was pretty ravenous too. I really wanted it.
Yeah, really hungry, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a big difference, I think.
It does. I was a pretty mediocre art or archaeology and history student when I was doing drugs and goofing around.
Right.
Yeah, I was nobody wanted my notes, and then were appalled to discover that I wrote 3 words and I'm dyslexic enough that they were backwards, So, yeah, here's my notes from that art history lecture. You can't read it. In fact, I can't read it. So,
did you know when you were younger that you were dyslexic? Because we know a lot of artists that are dyslexic.
Yeah. So my parents were both. My mom was a school psychologist. My dad was a PhD clinical psychologist, and so it did not go unnoticed in my house that, I think the absolute trigger was one day I asked my mother why it said Suggs 21 on a carton of eggs, which just made no sense to me. And she's like, "Oh, we really do have a problem. The kid wonders what Suggs 21 is doing on a carton of 12 eggs." So I got special help. I think I was in 3rd grade at the time, and something clicked. And I'm really lucky in that if I decide to read, I don't mix it up anymore. If I'm writing, I will sometimes, very often, start a word with the last letter of that word, but that's pretty correctable, and I catch myself. And I know I do it, so I proofread my work. I even do it when I'm typing. And just really lucky, because I know a lot of dyslexics don't have that happen. And if I'm not reading, like I'll look at stop signs and I'll see any of 4 things written on a stop sign. Or, I'll more often than not, I see spot, but I stop anyway, but I'll see tops and I'll see pots and I'll see stop sometimes too. But if it's a red octagon, I stop. And, but you don't read stop signs, you just look at them. So when I just look at something, I see crazy things. You don't necessarily read billboards. And I'll look at billboards and it just says bizarre stuff. And I'll think that makes no sense. And then very often I'll see the letters go back to where they belong. I'll see them moving across the billboard and realigning themselves. And it's like, oh, well, that makes more sense. They're advertising this or they're advertising that. They're not just saying gibberish in the sky, so.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists are dyslexic. I've run into a number. But I think I'm real lucky. And actually, I do a fair amount of writing. I've probably spent as much time in the last 6 or 8 years writing as I have spent painting.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So how did this come about, and what are you writing about?
So I'm writing about place, and I'm writing about personal history, both. I've got a novel that is at least primarily autobiographical that I think is ready to shop to editors and publishers. And then I've written a sort of deep history of this valley, starting with Paleo-Indian big game hunters hunting bison antiquus near here, and burying bones here, and burying bones of their loved ones here. And that's been the history of this valley is, if you go back 10,000 years, there's been some pretty interesting things that have kind of gone through this valley. And so I'm writing this sort of deep history of this valley, kind of as Mary and I have discovered it and come to love it, I guess. So I don't know. Long ago, I always took writing classes while even in grad school. I would take a creative writing class, which didn't, of course, count for anything. It was just an aside. But there I was on a college campus, and they were teaching writing, and so I took classes. And I remember one day, and I've said it ever since. They asked us on the first day why we were there, and I said that I was there to exorcise the demon of narrative from my painting. I didn't want to tell stories in paint. I wanted to just paint, but I had stories to tell. I write so that I don't need to tell stories in paint, and I write because I do have stories to tell, and so I'm pretty driven to do that too. I'll get up at 4 and write till the sun comes up, and then go to work, So yeah, writing has gotten to be real important too.
So are you getting funding at all for writing, or is this just something that you're working on and then hope to sell?
Everything, all my art is all spec. No one cares if I paint, no one cares if I write. I just do it because it's what I do.
Yeah.
I paint because I'm a painter, and I write because I'm a writer, and I don't know what else to do.
Right. I kind of thought maybe you got a grant or something from like South Dakota Humanities or someplace like that. So they do those books.
No. Yeah, I know I probably should. I don't know. The writing, no one's seen the writing. It's hard to get a grant for writing when you have no track record, I think.
Right.
But
sure. So you piqued my curiosity. What was wandering through the valley 10,000 years ago?
In that story, there's a group of big game hunters. They do a buffalo jump, and things go wrong, and a couple people die, which can happen in a buffalo jump. You're chasing, bison antiquus was half again as big as a modern bison, and you got a sharp stick, and your plan is to go get one of them. Things could go wrong, I figure. So I have things going wrong in the story. And then they take the bones of their leader who dies, and they wrap them up and anoint them with pigments and bury them here in this sacred place, which was sacred to them 10,000 years ago and sacred to me today.
Yeah.
And so that's how that story starts, and then moves through more modern, historic Indians, through the early gold seekers and the miners who followed them, and then this property was, the old timers call it the Dirty Woman place.
Oh, really?
So I wrote the story of the Dirty Woman. The Dirty Woman lived here. She was the Dirty Woman because she never bathed. And there's an old timer who talks about riding his pony down here as a little boy. Buck is in his 90s now. And he would ride a pony down here with a basket and get eggs from this woman. And she would, with these black, greasy hands, just filthy with grime, she'd place the eggs in his basket. And then he'd have to go home and not think about those eggs or those hands when he ate those eggs, And there apparently was a woman or a sign out by the road, which was dirt in those days, gravel and dirt. And it had an arrow that pointed up the hill into our valley. And on the arrow, it just said Dirty Woman. And, she had to have known that was there. But apparently was just fine with being the Dirty Woman. Which to me, the more I thought about it, I mean, why would you do that? It occurs to me that she's hiding. And so then I get to invent the whole story of what she's hiding and why.
Right.
Why you would live behind this mask of grime that keeps people put off and away from you. And so there's a pretty interesting story about the Dirty Woman and and why she's hiding in this valley and that kind of stuff. So it's a fun story to write.
Yeah, I bet.
It sounds really fun, like an interesting read. I'll be curious when it comes out.
Yeah, I hope that someday it does come out. I got to do something more about that. I'm more interested in writing than I am publishing. And so it's a little like I'm way more interested in painting than selling paintings. So I'm better at painting than selling them. So
you'd rather be in the thick of the process and just doing it. That's what you enjoy doing, right? Than the nuance of everything else that goes along with it.
Yeah, I'm not a marketing expert. I'm a painter and a writer. So.
Well, thanks for sharing about your writing. That's cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have favorite writers?
I do. Yeah. So, East of Eden, probably my favorite book.
It's John Steinbeck.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. And Kathleen Norris, who writes about the places I grew up in a way, is a tremendously powerful. Her later work's just stunning, I think. But yeah, I mean, I don't ever find enough time to read as much as I wish I could or should or whatever. But East of Eden, I've read that twice now and probably sit down and reread it again. It just seems to me so quintessentially American and Western. And I don't know, it speaks to me.
Yeah, he's a great writer. He's got, I read Travels with Charlie and just his insight and everything. It's just really, really great stuff.
Yeah, I changed my mind about poodles. Charlie was a poodle, wasn't he?
I think so. I think you might be right. Yeah.
I think he was a poodle. Yeah.
I want to take a moment again and talk about another piece. I'll share it.
Yeah.
Here. This is Blue Post's Big Orange Sun, and this is ink transfer with watercolor. Talk about this whole process and this particular piece.
So what I call ink transfer, sometimes I've seen it referred to as a trace monotype. So I'm starting with a sheet of intaglio ink on plexiglass, a real thin layer of ink rolled out in a rectangle in this case. And I started doing it, actually, I should say, because Paul Klee, the Swiss surrealist, did thousands of these, something like 4,000 or 5,000 ink transfers in his career. And I kept looking at his drawings, and in the art history books, they would say ink and watercolor. Well, that's true, but there's something else is going on here. This isn't just ink. It doesn't look like pen and ink anyway. And so what I do is I roll, and what he did was roll ink, intaglio ink in my case, out on a real thin sheet on a plexiglass. He would have used glass, I'm sure. And then you lay paper down over that ink, draw or rub on the back of that paper, and it transfers the ink to the front. And something alchemical happens under there, because I can draw a line on the back with a ballpoint, and it looks like I drew a line with a ballpoint, and it has no charm. It has no life. It's just a ballpoint pen line. And I can lift that paper up and flip it over and look at what transferred to the front of it. And magic. There's this black line all of a sudden that has a life and a quality that is just inexplicable. I mean, I do it at the Sanford Cancer Clinic with people, because I can walk them through a drawing of a still life or something, and they think they've done this kind of cruddy little still life in ballpoint pen, and then we lift it up and flip it over, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm an artist!" And it's like, yeah, you are. And so I'm getting away with murder here, because I'm doing these crappy little lines on the back with a ballpoint pen, and I flip the paper over, and magic happens. There's just this inherent, Paul Klee's Twittering Machine, for instance, is an ink transfer drawing. His most famous work. And, in Klee, I mean, he's so relaxed about it. You see places where anything that touches the back of the paper transfers ink to the front. And in Klee's work, you can see places where he just rested his hand right in the drawing, just put his hand down, knowing full well it's going to transfer, a partial handprint to the front of that drawing. But he doesn't care. I mean, he's a surrealist. I mean, it's all good. And I'm not necessarily doing stuff like that. But so I do this drawing on the back of paper and transfer ink to the front. And that's where the black comes from. And then flip it over, and ink and water, or oil and water don't mix. The ink is oil-based. So I splash some watercolor on it, and I'm done. I did, there's a requirement, part of the residencies through the State Arts Council, is that the artists work on their own works in public view, which is kind of an interesting thing to do. And so after work, these last few weeks when I've been at the Suzie Cappa Art Center, downtown Rapid City, that kind of ends at 2. So from 2 to 4, when the gallery closes, I just was out in the gallery doing ink transfer drawings. And so from 2 to 4 on 3 days, I did a dozen of them. And they're quick and fun and easy. And then the results are way better than you deserve. And then, which is, a lot of fun. And then I could paint 2 a day and dry them. So I got a dozen ink transfer drawings with watercolor out of that 5-week workshop. So it's kind of fun. And I did a bunch of watercolor paintings too, until I had absolutely had it with watercolor and couldn't stand doing one more day of just straight up watercolor. And I think I was telling people that watercolor was simply a misuse of pigment. Mix that stuff with polymers or oil, and we're so much better off. But
once again, watching that video, you did an ink transfer, and the interesting thing was, and you can see it in this one, the streak down, well, all through it, but how you just used your finger and it for shading, and on the, so I thought that was very interesting too. It gives it some depth to it.
Yeah, I can put in anything so when you rub, I use the heel of my hand or a finger or my thumb or a couple fingers, and any pressure I put on the back of the paper transfers ink to the front. And I can get a tone, transferred in, like on the left side of this, there's a streak of dark that runs vertically up the left side on the top. Yeah. And I know that was done with the heel of my hand in one stroke, which to draw that, with anything, maybe I guess you could do it quickly like that with charcoal or something. But to draw that in ink any other way would require a tremendous amount of effort, time and effort. And I can whip it in just literally inside of a second. That whole streak of value running up and down that side of that painting or that drawing is a second or less of work. So yeah, that's a lot of fun to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really a cool piece. I like this.
It is really cool. And going back to that video that Wes mentioned again, it intrigues me to see artists working, and I was intrigued by your mark making in the video. It fascinates me. It was all very, again, intuitive and fast, and you're describing it as scribbles, but I don't look at it necessarily that way. It just, I don't know. It's interesting, I guess, because it's not something I do, but it intrigues me to see what's being translated, from your mind to your hand to the medium. Yeah, fascinating. And then love-hate relationship with watercolor?
Yeah, at best. I spent 2 weeks doing it for 2 hours a day, and I had so had it. You have to plan, and there are things you can't do. And, I've taken belt sanders to acrylic paintings. Try that with a watercolor. There's just some things you can't do. And I'm really self-taught. And one of the things I learned is I can do anything I damn well please, except in watercolor. All of a sudden there's things I'm not allowed to do. And it's like, what?
What about gouache? Have you experimented much with gouache?
Yeah, I'm happier with gouache than watercolor. And I do it when I'm traveling as a visiting artist some, because I can, do it in a hotel room or and not leave permanent marks, or I can do it in a school or something too. I have a real bad habit of sort of half rinsing a brush, wanting a little color left in it, and then I'll snap it to, and dry it that way by snapping water out of it onto the ground. And I do that in a school, and I always know when I've done it because the whole room, all the kids gasp. It's like, well, you're not allowed to do that in school. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm not allowed to do that in school. So acrylic is dangerous for me to use in a school because I'll put it just about anywhere, anytime I feel like. So, but watercolor and gouache, are safer for me to be using in public. And at Suzie Cappa, I was working in their gallery, which is a beautiful gallery in downtown Rapid, and they don't really want me leaving indelible marks on their floor. So,
right.
So watercolor was the way to go there.
Gotcha. I noticed with all these posts on Instagram, it's almost poetic what you write in addition to posting whatever piece. Like this particular one, Blue Post, Big Orange Sun, you wrote, green lingers in the dusted silver sage, brown plains slide away under rolling ridges and banded buttes that lift low into the autumn sunset. Straight wires cut a sphere into square sections. That's beautiful, man.
Thanks. Yeah. And pretty much every piece I paint or draw, there's a lot of people call them poems. I just call them prose because I have some friends who are poets and they're so much better. But yeah, I'm glad you like that. I'm glad you think that's beautiful because I work on that too. Crafting that is part of the piece, and explains what I'm thinking.
I love the thought behind it. Like you just said, you're describing the piece, but also, I mean, I can appreciate a well-crafted, how well-crafted it is. I immediately noticed that when I was reading, looking at different pieces and reading what you were writing. But yeah, beautiful prose.
Thanks.
You had a show back at the art center, the Jamestown Art Center, earlier this year in the spring.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that and what you were showing.
So yeah, kind of returning to my roots, back to where I was a gallery director 25 years ago. Yeah, so I trucked 64 pieces up there, all from the last 4 years, paintings and ink transfers with watercolor. So, and some graphite. I love drawing in graphite on Yupo. I don't know if you've ever played around on Yupo. It's a plastic paper. It's polypropylene, and it just loves graphite. It sucks graphite up, and you can erase from the darkest mark you can make with graphite. You can erase back to white with one stroke of an eraser. It's just stunningly flexible. It's more like painting than drawing. And so there were some graphite on Yupo pieces in that show too. It was interesting to see 64 pieces all in one really beautiful gallery, and all well lit. And because in my gallery I see a few on the walls in my studio, or I see 8 or 10 of them in my gallery. But 64 of them had a whole different impact. And so it was kind of instructive for me, although I'm still thinking about what I think. I'm still trying to decide. I can feel a change coming on, and I think it's going to be related to having seen it all at once like that, because they have a big, beautiful gallery. And I can feel change coming, partly because I'm frustrated right now with what I'm doing. And anytime I get frustrated, I know things are going to change. My experience is that I will paint my way out of that frustration. And so right now I'm kind of looking forward to change and to finding a new variation on what it is that I do. I mean, I've done landscapes and the grid now for 28 years ago or something was when I decided I was painting landscapes, and there were these weird squares in them. And I realized what I was doing, and I'm still doing that. And I don't expect that to change based on this frustration, this current kind of feeling I have. But I know my experience tells me that I'm in for a change, and that in a year my paintings will be different than they were. I mean, they're always different, but sometimes I circle around back to something, or it's a new combination. This is going to be a change, and I can tell that real change is coming. So it's kind of, I'm a little curious to see what happens. So.
And you can't really put your finger on what that frustration is per se. It's just more of a feeling of frustration. Well,
I am not liking the paintings I'm doing. It seems like I'm maybe working in the manner of Mark Zimmerman, and that Mark Zimmerman needs to just get to work, is kind of how I would put it. So I'm uncomfortable, and when I'm uncomfortable, then I change. And this has happened as I've gotten older. It used to mean that there would be a canvas or two that probably wouldn't even survive the process. But as I've gotten older, I'm less likely to just destroy things that are irritating. I just keep working on them, but getting old and soft, So used to be that if it irritated me, it died.
So these paintings that and drawings that you displayed at the art center, was it kind of a retrospective, or was it current work?
The oldest pieces went back about 4 years.
Okay, so it was pretty current then.
Pretty current, yeah. It's a big gallery, and so I needed to go back about 4 years to fill it. They do a lot of two-person shows up there because it's pretty big. But I filled it no problem. With 64 is quite a bit of work.
That's a huge amount of work, and I do think it's interesting to see a whole body of your work together. It really does give you kind of a sense of, I don't know, what you've been doing, because it's easy to just, as you're working on individual pieces, or even like you said, just seeing maybe 8 or 10 pieces in your studio. That's not the same as seeing like a wide expanse of work, I think.
Yeah. The other thing that happened up there is I kind of hinted at it, or I spoke about it in my gallery talk. The sort of problem I have with the grid, and the grid as a metaphor for what modern society is doing to the landscape. And I think I need to be. People don't necessarily pick that up. I mean, I'm visually literate enough that I look at a landscape full of grids and I think, conflict. I think, but that's not what everybody thinks. Americans are not necessarily highly visually literate in that they don't necessarily, and I think I'm going to need to hit them over the head with it, is one of the things. And I'm struggling for the language, visual language, to be more overt about that. These are environmental pieces in a way that they are about the landscape and nature and the ways that we misuse it, and also the ways we love it too. Because when I paint that ridge and I want it to look like it's luscious and alive, I want you to love that ridge right along with me. But when I cut through it with some part of some square or bang a corner of a square into it, I want you to feel like violence has been done. And I think that kind of violence doesn't necessarily register with a lot of people. A lot of people miss that that's what this is about. And so I'm struggling I'm searching for the visual language to let people in on that a little more overtly. One of the things I've done, and I'm not happy with how it works, but I've been using stencils and I've been putting the names of endangered plants and animals into the paintings. So, like I did an ink transfer drawing not long ago called Accipiter gentilis, which is the Northern Goshawk. And so I have the scientific name Accipiter gentilis is in this painting. And goshawks require old growth forests to nest and hunt. And those are, of course, endangered, especially here in the Black Hills. And so there's the text in the stencils that say Accipiter gentilis. And then there's this field of tree stumps, and then the hills, and then the geometry. And so I'm trying to clue people in that this is about something, that a large raptor does not do well in a clear-cut forest. And so I'm looking for how to make that work visually too. I know how to write about it. I know how to speak about it, but I'm not sure how to show it. And I'm big on show me, don't tell me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's a complex problem to solve, right?
It is. That's why I'm stuck.
Yeah, man. That's intense. I'm always thinking, in the process of doing this podcast and trying to talk about various pieces of art, I always feel like, the written word, the English language doesn't do justice to anything that you're seeing. Like, you have to observe it yourself. when we talk about it on the podcast, it's obviously great to hear from the artists and have them describe what this piece is about or how they're feeling about it. But the English language, I find, fails so many times because there's only, so many words that you can use to describe something. And at some point you feel like you've used every single word in the dictionary for describing things. Whereas with visual art, you can convey so much more as far as emotion and those sort of things, a feeling. But what you're talking about takes it to another level, I feel like how do you convey this? You describe it very well in your writing, but how are you going to do this, incorporate it into these pieces?
Yeah. And I don't know, which is fine.
Yeah. No, I'm excited.
I think not knowing is a good thing.
Yeah. The mystery and the hunt.
I mean, once we know, once we've reached a conclusion, that means we're pretty much done thinking. We have concluded thought, and now we know. And so and sometimes I'm comfortable telling you what I know, showing you what I know. But right now, I want to tell you more than I know. So.
Yeah, and I think we've done a disservice with our educational system in the sense that we don't understand metaphor anymore, and that's apparent in even our the current music that we listen to. They lost a sense of metaphor. Everything is so literal, and I think if you're not teaching students about metaphor and simile and in that sense, it's hard to look at something and come up with what it's saying without having a board beat over the head with it, and I'm even guilty of that. Sometimes I have a hard time trying to figure out, and so I was always hung up on like, what are they trying to say instead of what am I getting out of it? But I think it's always good when the artist like throws a little nugget out there, so you have a place to start from. But more art appreciation classes and would be helpful, in art history,
It would. We teach art classes like everybody might be an artist when they grow up. We don't teach art appreciation, which might make a lot more sense because everybody might be in the audience, but not everybody's going to be a painter. Nor do we want everybody to be a painter. We got a problem if everybody's a painter. So, because how useless am I? So there's that. And then, what do? I create images that are illusions. That's what I do. But, like I wish I knew more about music. And I struggle because I love music. We just went to a concert, the symphony here in Rapid, did some Beethoven, and Beethoven always just like floors me. But I don't really know it. Do you know what synesthesia is?
I've heard of the term.
Yeah, where you can listen to music that you see like colors. Is that correct?
That's it.
That's one thing that happens. Some synesthetes can smell and taste colors, can smell and taste sounds. It's the sensory apparatus in your brain crossing over. And so, Mary and I see colors when I hear music. And I just thought that was normal until maybe 10, 12 years ago. And I heard something on public radio and they were talking about synesthesia. And I was like, oh, that's not normal. I was like, I thought everybody closed their eyes and saw Beethoven, and, saw the fireworks. And so I was just at this concert and Mary is sitting there and I got my eyes closed because I see it better then. And I'm just like, I'm in tears. Beethoven is ripping me up. And she looks over at me and she says, "You're doing it, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I am doing it. Of course I'm doing it. God, you would too if you could." But, so I love music, but I am not a informed audience member. I don't have the background. I could solve the problem and I could study, but I wish I knew more about Beethoven. I know that I love it, and that it just rocks me. But I don't know the history of it. I don't know where he came from, and I don't know the effects, what he affected afterwards. And I don't know the history of music the way that I know the history of art.
Right.
And so there's this gap in I guess what I'm saying is there music appreciation, art appreciation seems to be to me more useful for the public. I think painters are going to paint. Beethoven's probably going to make music, whether you tell him how or not. I'm going to paint, whether you tell me how, show me how or not. No one did show me how, and I paint.
Beethoven was creating symphonies after he went deaf. So
yeah, right.
So it's in him. He's going to do it no matter what.
He's going to do it. Yeah. So I don't never worry about running out of artists. I think their artists are going to make themselves. But I worry about the audience, and it'd be nice to have an audience that was better informed and looked at my paintings and went, oh, I bet these are talking about more than just the landscape.
Yeah, I think that's the downfall of our education system right now. We've talked to some other artists that, aren't or didn't grow up in the United States, and critical thinking is no longer taught in our schools. And I think that's the missing link. And we're seeing it in, kind of the demise of us, essentially. That's the kind of feeling I get when I see what's going on in the news, when I see what's going on with climate change, in all facets of our culture,
I guess, I wish we taught more art and music appreciation. It doesn't mean I don't think we should be teaching art and don't think we should be teaching music. So, I don't know why we can't have it all, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Why can't we have it all?
If you ask for more, you very often get it. And it seems like we are aiming too low. And
How do you currently feel? Obviously, you're connected to nature. You live in a beautiful place. You love to get out hiking. You love these big open spaces of the plains. How do you feel right now, the state of our planet and with climate change? Obviously, you see some of that in your art. How do you feel?
Yeah. I'm scared and I'm sad. And I'm trying to figure out how to say that in paint. And that's the frustration I'm having. And it's the struggle I'm currently engaged with. So I'm doing a lot of doodles and trying to figure it out. But I'm scared and I'm sad. And we had goshawks that nested near here for years. And they put a road in up there, and goshawks just don't deal with disturbance. And they're gone. And they're disappearing from the Black Hills. And when they're gone, most people won't miss them because they're secretive. But we're talking about an animal. Attila the Hun took the head of a goshawk and mounted it on his helmet. So you knew he was a badass when he showed up. Because nobody is a bigger badass than a goshawk. The first time we knew we had goshawks in the area, we found a pile of red squirrel tails under a perch. There were a dozen of them because goshawks don't eat tails. So they're just plucking the tail off these squirrels. And they're massacring things. And this is a bird that when the male is feeding the female and the nestlings, he doesn't even have time to clean himself in the creek. So he is covered in blood day and night because he's hunting for four. And he's just a stone cold killer. And to lose something that wild and that untame, that's a loss that you can't replace. And that's like losing the wolf or the mountain lion or the loon, the elk. you hear an elk call, you hear the bugle of an elk, and you think, yeah, this is the earth, the wildness of the earth screaming at me. And the loon call, the call of the wolf, the cry of the goshawk. These are animals that are different. It's not like I don't want to lose the pika either, and it might be the most endangered mammal on the planet with global warming coming. They need snow cover in mountains to survive, and if they don't have it, they're dead. And so they're in real trouble. But somehow a little lagomorph up there on the high peaks is not as screaming necessary as the goshawk and the wolf. I grew up in northern Minnesota a lot too, and you hear the wolf call at night, and you hear him howling, and man, it's primal, and I think there's a connection we're in danger of losing, and we won't know it when it's gone. My niece and nephew, Mary and I don't have kids, but I've got nieces and nephews, and I want them to know that. I want them to hear the wolf and wonder if they're going to get out of this tent and this darkness alive. So, I remember sitting and wolves howling all around the tent, pitched in a snowbank in April in Minnesota. And they're howling out there 100, 150 yards all the way around us. So they know we're there. And in your head that they're not coming for you. But by God, it's the wilderness speaking to you first person. And it's powerful. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
And when it's gone, the power is gone.
Yeah. There's no getting it back.
Nope.
And we have a short memory. So once they're gone.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel about the planet. I love it to death, and I'm afraid we're killing it. It makes me really sad.
Yeah.
Sometimes it makes me angry.
I feel this exact same way. In fact, it keeps me up at night. That's how much it affects me, and I think about it. I think about my children. I think about other people that I know that have grandchildren, and what is this world gonna be like in 50 years, if there's even gonna be a world in 50 years. And it scares the hell out of me.
Kurt Vonnegut, in his last book, Man Without a Country, he said, "So what do I tell my grandkids? I'm sorry, it was a hell of a party. How much was that party worth?"
Right. And then there's a recent article that came out, I think it came through NPR this week, talking about how we've lost like 69% of the wildlife in the last century. That's a staggering amount of animals that have just disappeared.
Yeah. We see it here in the valley. We used to have violet green swallows and tree swallows and barn swallows, and we used to have 8, 10, 12 nesting pairs in the valley every year. In the last 2 years, we've had one nesting pair of barn swallows. And there just are not insects enough to feed them. So they're gone. And their absence isn't something you would come, we have a cabin we rent to tourists, and they come here and they think this is so beautiful, and they love it. And they don't miss the violet green swallow, but I do. And I'm afraid he's never coming back. And so I know this place in a way that no one may ever know it again. And so in some ways I feel responsible to do something, to say something about what's gone, to speak for the missing.
And you will. That's what artists do. That's what artists do. They move us forward. They make us think and make us, have this kind of conversation, this dialogue. On the flip side, I try to be hopeful about everything. I know that, reading another article about William Shatner taking his trip up into space recently, and he was describing, that he had this, and I guess this is pretty common, people that travel to space for the first time, but, they have this like dread that washes over them. and they just get the sense of, he said that, it was like death. All he could see was death. And then he looked at our planet and realized just how fragile it is and what we're doing to it. But he said when he returned to Earth, he had like it spun on him, and he had to reappreciate, or more of an appreciation for it. And not only that, like hope, like, it inspired him to want to do more. And, he's in his 90s, I think now. So that kind of thing gives me hope, and that we got ourselves into this mess. Hopefully we can try to figure out how to get us out of it. There's enough smart people. We have the resources. We just got to do something,
It is, I think, the reason to teach art and music. And even though you're not going to be an artist necessarily, there's no better kind of calisthenics for the imagination than art, music, and writing. And if we get out of this, we're going to imagine our way out. And that's the only way out from where we're at. And without imagination, I mean, I need engineers who are imaginative, because they're going to have to solve some stuff. So I need them thinking outside the box like an artist. And
and that's what happens when you focus on STEM, but you don't focus on creativity.
Yeah. The great scientists are very creative. Einstein is way out there. I mean, he's thinking stuff outside the box, and he changes the world. And we need to change the world. And so we need some Einsteins who are outside the box. Yep.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to talk about a piece that Wes had mentioned to me before we jumped on today. And this is Black Ridge Blue Fence. Talk a little bit about this piece.
Yeah. Actually, the text that goes with it tells you a lot about it, but just a little piece. I think it's 2 feet across or something.
Yeah, 24 by 24.
24 by 24. There we go. Oh, yeah. Again, it's the playing with the way light moves, a sense for the energy of the sun, the sense for the energy in the sky. Trying to paint all of that. I mean, it's easy to paint a fence. So there's a fence in there. But, I mean, that's the easiest part. I'm done when it looks like a fence, right? That's when I got that right. But how do you get that sky right? That's a whole harder problem. How do you capture the energy of that sky in paint? And how do you make people feel that at the same time? And so
I'll go ahead and read what you wrote real quick. It says, the gravel narrows to vanish in the dust of the plains. Thin grasses bow before a ceaseless wind that carries the bright notes of a meadowlark's song. Insects buzz as day burns down, bright and blue. Blazing summer sears green to gold. That's beautiful.
That. It is.
I mean, that's what I'm painting. I'm painting Song of the Meadowlark, and I'm painting the insects buzzing, and that's harder than painting insects.
This one is different in that a lot of times I see the fence line goes across the very bottom like a barrier, but this one actually goes off into the horizon. And I feel like there's a lot of hope in this painting, that there's a road leading out into the future, into the horizon, and it just hit me as I was looking at it. But yeah, this one gives me like a sense of hope,
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I have hopeful days, and I tend to paint things that are really in your face, sort of in terms of the geometry of it, that don't necessarily allow you into a painting like that fence line invites you in. The other thing, a lot of my paintings, and this one does not so much do it, a lot of my paintings kind of exist in pieces. So like you could look at part of it and there's a painting, and then over there's another painting in that part of the work, and then in the top of the work there's another painting. In fact, we used to do critiques here at our gallery and studio. A bunch of artists would come out and they were all talking about how, there's a painting here and there's a painting there and you got paintings all over your paintings. And they, in some ways, don't even need each other. They're fine on their own. So the next morning I got up and went out to the studio and flopped some paintings down on my table and got out a carpet knife and started slicing them into bits and made new paintings with a carpet knife. So yeah, it's weird for me to open it up like that and let you in. I'm more likely to block you from getting into my painting. Yeah.
So here's the interesting thing I see when I looked at this is a feel of a Mondrian, the elements, how they're broken up but go off the edge and different geometric shapes, but they're weighted really well together. So it just has that sense of a Mondrian in an essence.
Well, thanks. I'll take Mondrian.
Yeah. What does it for me is, so I'm pointing at the screen like you can see it, but you got the yellow and orange on the right-hand side. That's a narrow rectangle going down the side, but then it's blocked by a layer of black that stops it. And then you got the blue and then the sun inside, even though maybe Mondrian wouldn't do that, but it really has a feel of a Mondrian, just, segmented, but it works well together because of the balance and perspective of it all, I guess. And it's not perspective that I'm looking for, but
there's actually a fair amount of math behind it in some ways. So I'm doing a lot of stuff that's really golden using phi and p. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of those divisions are permutations of those numbers. So I'm dividing that space up into some real classical geometry.
Yeah.
And I think that resonates with people. Yeah.
I love your use of color too. The different color temperatures that you use, from the cool tones to the really warm tones. I mean, I see that in the majority of what you do, and you're a master when it comes to it. I will say that, because it really does draw you in.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I'm trying.
I want to talk about one more piece. Yeah. This one is Coneflowers, Blue Ridge. And I'll read real quick. A sun bleeds down from above. The plains divide into empty quarters. Distant rain falls in sheets. Its thunder beyond hearing. Its welcome moisture meant for other lands. Dusty sage waits in vain. Coneflowers. I don't know much about them. What sparked the incorporation of those into this particular piece?
Well, on one level, I'm just trying to give somebody something to latch onto, and so they know they're in a landscape. Coneflowers, one of my just favorite flowers. I love them. I love their shape. I love how they exist and how tough they are. And so it also lets me create a foreground in this piece, which then gives me space. So as soon as I have a foreground, because some of my pieces essentially exist without foreground, or, there are color shapes that float forward, but then you look at them and then all of a sudden they sink back, and because something else comes forward, and there's these shifting planes very often. But this lets me open up the space again, bringing something way forward, right up under your nose. And actually, there are a bunch of coneflowers in the black behind the three that are in color. So there's kind of even layers of foreground too. But a lot of this is, it's again very much about paint and what I can do with paint and how in love with it I am. Can I read you something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, please.
So this is just a paragraph I wrote for this autobiographical novel. This is me talking to a friend of mine who is the other guy who saved my life, the sponsor I had when I got to Narcotics Anonymous. And he was a painter. this is kind of about a place where it's shortly before he died. And he wants to know about passion and what moves me. And so this is passion. Paint and I speak to one another like old lovers still in the throes of a passionate affair. I love what she can stir in me and what she can make me feel, what she hides and reveals. I relish what I can do to, for, and with her. I love laying her down, her application and deposition on canvas or board. I love how she takes shape under brushes, knives, and fingers, how she responds to the forces of water, gravity, heat, and wind, how she satisfies and surprises me still. So that tells you a little bit about what I'm doing with paint. So that big sun that's bleeding down over that whole landscape, I'm just having part of it is I want that to happen, and part of it is I'm just having a tremendous amount of fun with paint. And I'm in love with this stuff. So,
well, it definitely shows through. And I think as we've been talking, I've been looking at these pieces, spending some time with them and then hearing you talk about them. I think what really attracts me to a particular artist and their work is the complexity and the diversity. And I see that that you explore, you're constantly exploring, and that excites me. And that gets me jazzed when which is why we're talking to you, because like I said, you've been on our radar for a long time. I look at your stuff and I see your posts, and I just think you're an interesting person. But I love all the different facets of what you're incorporating in these pieces. I mean, you have these things that are very abstract with, the landscape and then stuff that's very illustrative in some ways. It looks like illustration, and I love how it seamlessly goes together, and you're left with this just beautiful piece. It's intelligent.
Yeah. Well, yeah. One of the things I use is, you ever seen a reducing lens? It's the opposite of a magnifying glass. So when I sit in my rocking chair, very often I pull out a reducing lens, and so it's like you're seeing this painting not from across the room, but from across the room and down the hall and around the corner. You're all of a sudden you're way far away from it, and so the parts that are illustration, those painting the painted coneflowers in the foreground there, very illustrational. But through the reducing lens, those are little yellow dots in a painting, and they have to work as yellow dots or I don't like them, So they're working on a lot of levels. They're inviting people to appreciate that, that these flowers are special and beautiful and that they're real, because some of that painting, if you look at the painting above the coneflowers on the left side, or even just anything above the coneflowers, it's just pure abstraction. Those are just squares and rectangles and lines and puddles of paint. In some ways, I can get away with making squares, rectangles, lines, and puddles of paint if I invite you in with a coneflower.
Yeah, sometimes we need an entry point, right?
Yeah. I mean, I want people to like them too. I mean, if no one likes them, then I'm not communicating anything, and I want to communicate something. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, that's a great piece.
Hey, this morning when I was perusing Facebook, I saw that you posted a poem of sorts, or more you describe as prose, but you posted like 6 hours ago, early this morning. I'm just kind of curious.
Right.
Would you share that with us?
Yeah. So this is something I wrote this morning. Got up, sat down, wrote this. And I suppose it is a poem, which I try not to write. It's called As It Turns Out. Pour everything in. Put it all out there. Waste time treading backwaters. Dig holes and fill them. Total it up. In the end, nobody cares, knows, or even dares. Carry one love in your heart. Surround the damn thing. Find but empty and dark. And finally, in the end, there's no time to beat life's. Life is a cheat. No fire, no heat. We stand alone with our wishes and lies in the end. Live for you. No difference, as it turns out. Life runs downhill steeply. Closed doors, cold beds, and soon enough, cold, dead.
A lot of truth in there, man.
Yeah. That's a little inspiration, kind of poking its head through.
Do you feel like time's ticking for you? Are you starting to feel your mortality a bit?
Oh yeah. I lost my dad to Alzheimer's a few years ago, and I am the age at which it you could tell that it was affecting him. So, and I can feel it already. And I think I'm heading down that road, and I know how it ends. And so it's really hard not to feel my mortality. Because there are gaps in what I can remember all of a sudden. 2 years ago, there was not. Yeah, I'm scared, and I can see it coming. Also makes things a little urgent, like I got to get to the studio and paint because I got things to say still. And I don't know how long I can say anything. And when I can't say anything, I'm not sure that I want to continue. So I don't know how long I have.
But you haven't been necessarily diagnosed with this thing. You just feel like
no.
Maybe things
probably,
are a little bit different.
Yeah, it's the names of things disappear from time to time. It could just be, I'm 61, and it might just be, maybe it isn't early onset Alzheimer's. Maybe this is just what 61 is like. Not quite as sharp as I was at 21 and 31, but it's noticeable to me that there are gaps in what I can remember, and I know I have the genetics for it. So, and I guess I've decided I'm not going to hide from it.
Well, the good thing is that they're coming up with breakthroughs and different treatments and drugs all the time. I know in the last, my dad is suffering from Alzheimer's, early onset Alzheimer's. And so I'm hopeful with these new treatments that they're coming up with. At the same time, it weighs on my mind because I noticed that at 53, that I don't have all the memory and recall that I used to have. So you got to cash that in the back of your mind. Like, hey, is this just a normal thing?
I know. Yeah.
I always pride myself on having a fairly extensive vocabulary, and all of a sudden in conversation, I won't have that word that I want. And I'm always like grasping at straws sometimes. But I also noticed that if I don't get the correct amount of sleep, and I need my sleep, that the computer doesn't function at its full capacity. So I'm hoping that it's just a natural age thing. But I feel you, man.
Could be.
At 53,
and even old age is fearsome enough.
Oh, absolutely.
Even without even without Alzheimer's. The first guy who saved my life, one of the things he told me the day he saved my life was that he wanted to be backpacking with me when we were 80. And so that's still part of my plan, but I'm not entirely sure I get to do that. So
I'm about to turn 61 too in November, and I'm dealing with both my mom and my dad. My mom's far worse. She's a year older. She's 81, just turned 82 actually, and my dad's about to turn 81. And watching them go through this, and my mom lives with me now, so I'm watching her on a daily basis and the changes that are happening fairly rapidly. And then talking to my dad every day on the phone, I can tell he's got good days and bad days where his short-term memory is just crap. And it's definitely given me a different outlook on aging, and whether I want to, if I'm in the same place they are now when I'm 80, I'm not sure I want to do it either. I might look for another way,
Yeah. You think about it, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, when I turned 50, things started to kind of, your body starts to fall apart. And then when I turned 60, I'm like Todd, I'm noticing I'm not as sharp, and Todd can attest, I can't remember anybody's name. And sometimes I'm surprised who the hell we had on the podcast 2 years ago. Like, oh, who's that? And Todd has to remind me, and I'm like, oh, that's right. I remember now. So, but it makes you think.
It does. It's a good ride so far. I'll see where it goes. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Well, you just keep pushing along and doing what you do, right? It's like the old Neil.
You can do.
It's like the Neil Young song, right? It's better to burn out than to fade away. So you just keep on burning it, man.
Yep, that's my plan.
Be interesting to ask him what he thinks about those terms now that he's older, because I'm sure when he wrote that, he was probably in his late 20s, early 30s, and he was like burning out now instead of, when he's 70 or whatever he is.
Yeah, I think he wrote that in the late 70s.
Yeah.
So, because I can remember where I was the first time I heard it. So.
Oh, is that right?
So still have some synapses firing.
I was just going to say, man, if you have that memory, that's good.
I think the other thing you have going for you is now you're writing, and, I think that helps keep things sharper. I think, who knows, but it helps.
I do think there's a use it or lose it thing as you age. And I think I'm using a lot right now. I just, I'm hoping the tools are still there in a decade. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Me and you both, brother.
I think they will be, man. I mean, you got a lot of irons in the fire. You got a lot of stuff going on. You write incredibly well. I'd buy your book. I'd buy your book if you decide to do a book of poems. I love poetry. So does Wes.
Yeah.
I'd buy that in a heartbeat. And I love what you're doing with your painting and your drawing. And I think it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, most definitely.
Hey, do you have any other shows that are coming up between now and the end of the year, or anything in particular that you're looking forward to, either now, between now and the end of the year, or in 2023 that you have coming up?
I do not. I think I need to approach a gallery and a show space in Sioux Falls next, and I probably really need to look south into the Denver area and the Santa Fe area. But it's really hard. I'm pretty remote here. It's hard to show. It's hard to. It's just the logistics of it are kind of tough.
Yeah. So. We would definitely help you if we can. Boy, love to have your stuff showing down in Denver, because I think it'd be well received down there.
I totally agree.
Well, you let me know where, and I'll get a hold of them.
Okay.
All right.
We'll put something together for you.
Okay, cool.
Before we let off, I just want to thank you for the time that you've spent with us today. And it was a pleasure to meet you, even though we're just doing this virtually. And I hope that here in the next little bit of time, in the next 6 months or so, I get up to South Dakota. And if so, if you're around, if you're not, working with other kids, other folks, I'd love to come do a studio visit sometime. Yeah, great. I mean, I would love to see you out there. So it's actually one of the more remarkable places in South Dakota, because you don't expect what you walk into when you step. You walk in through the barn and you step through this double door, and there's a modern art gallery. So it's pretty cool. And Mary's stuff is, I think, wonderful too. So, and her work's in there as well. I
she's
agree.
got some wonderful stuff.
Yeah. Your whole setup looks amazing to me. So I would love to see that in person, and meet your lovely wife and check out her work as well. Yeah. Well, great. I appreciate you talking with me. It's been a fun conversation. Again, follow Mark on Instagram at Mark_Z_art. And be sure to check out his beautiful work at the website, greeninkgalleryandstudios.com. I'll have all this and more in this week's episode notes. For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.